W. Bush, 2005. Tonight's reading is made possible by the Multnomah Monthly Meeting and Friends Meeting House, as well as the volunteers who are reading and who have helped bring this play together. At last count, we are 18 readers, plus our audience plant, Marilyn Pike. We invite you to join Marilyn. Please cheer, boo, hiss, or applaud as we take you through this unique trial. Joe Anybody, an independent video film documenter for Peace and Justice events in Portland, is filming this production free gratis, as is Gordon Sturrock from Veterans for Peace in Eugene. And they will be posting them on websites. One of them is in your program, and Gordon, yours is?
Squadron13.com.
Squadron13.com, and if you want to, you can get a hold of me if you want more information. I want to thank Sean and Van Dorn for offering to design and print our programs and publicity flyers. And Bonnie Tinker has brought impeachment shirts. They're $10 each. This is a hot item. Or 2 for $15. Bumper stickers and the handprints are for a donation. Also, Ron Braithwaite will be out here shortly, and he has with him, will be carrying a petition. I don't know if you know this, but 3,500 Oregon National Guard are scheduled to be deployed next spring to Iraq and Afghanistan. Congress has not authorized this continued use of the Guard, and we hope to take thousands of signatures to Salem to convince the legislature they need to take action. We want to keep them home. So there are petitions here. If you have not signed one and you're an Oregon resident, please sign before you leave tonight. Joe Walsh, our playwright, wrote The Trial of George W. Bush when he believed that John Kerry would move to the White House and that the world would hold Bush accountable for his crimes. It wasn't to be. But we have dusted off the play and found it to have great energy and poignancy today. We hope you agree. Since we began this production, Joe became seriously ill. He's unable to perform his favorite role, George Patton. He has made, however, a supreme effort to be with us in the audience. Please welcome Joe and Patty, their daughter Chris, and granddaughter Liz. Finally, Paul Chan, who is an artist and social activist, said, "Politics is about concentrating power. Art is about dispersing it. But a piece of art is only complete with its audience. Continue, please, to support those whose voices cry for justice and equality." Thank you. We will begin the play.
All rise for the Honorable Justice, Supreme Court Chief Justice, Justice John Jay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The matter before this court is both serious and unusual. It is serious because we, the people of the United States, have taken it upon ourselves to try an ex-president for high crimes and misdemeanors, because our Congress refuses to act. This trial comes under our duty as the people of the United States to bring justice to all who would damage our democracy by war profiteering, lying about going to war, misappropriation of federal monies, lying to Congress, causing countless deaths of innocent Iraqis, and the mistreatment of prisoners. We will decide this case upon the laws of this land and the articles of the Nuremberg trials as war crimes. That is, violations of the laws or customs of war. Such violations shall include, but not be limited to, murder, ill-treatment or deportation of civilian population, murder or ill-treatment of prisoners of war, killing of hostages, plunder of public or private property, wanton destruction of cities, towns, or villages, or devastation not justified by military necessity. The official position of defendants, whether as heads of state or responsible officials in government departments, shall not be considered as freeing them from responsibility or mitigating punishment. In addition to any punishment imposed by it, this court shall have the right to deprive the convicted person of any stolen property and order its delivery to the proper authorities. The proceedings at this trial shall take the following course. The indictment shall be read in court. The judge shall ask each defendant whether he or she pleads guilty or innocent. The prosecution shall make an opening statement. The judge shall ask the prosecution and the defense what evidence, if any, they wish to submit to the court, and the court shall rule upon the admissibility of any such evidence. The witnesses for the prosecution shall be examined, and after that, the witnesses for the defense. Thereafter, such rebutting evidence as may be held by the court to be admissible shall be called by either the prosecution or the defense. The court may put any question to any witness and to any defendant at any time. The prosecution and the defense shall interrogate and may cross-examine any witness and any defendant who gives testimony. The defense shall address the court. The prosecution shall address the court. Each defendant may make a statement to the court. The jury shall deliver judgment. The court will pronounce sentence. I will now read the indictment.
Your Honor, we waive the reading of the indictment and ask to proceed to trial.
Mr. Prosecutor?
No objection, Your Honor.
Because of the unusual nature of this trial, the jury is made up of souls who have been called here because of their unique qualifications to judge this matter. Our first jurist is well known to you as the first President of the United States, George Washington.
I have come from my place of rest to this place because I fear my republic is in danger of becoming a dictatorship. I swear by all that is holy that I will give President Bush every opportunity to explain to us why he did what he did, and give him a fair and honest hearing. I will not hold it against him that his first name is George. You all know what I think of the last George I had dealings with.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our next jurist is also well known to us as the President who helped keep the Union together, the Honorable President Abe Lincoln, the 16th President of these United States.
When the summons was delivered to me, I did not want to believe what I was reading. I have always asked myself if I could have done things differently and saved American lives. This question will haunt me for eternity. The question before us today is very grave indeed, and I swear by the Almighty that I will hear and make judgment in this matter. I do have a question for the court. Is this the father or the son you're trying to?
It is the son, Mr. President. Our next jurist is a woman of great character, Abigail Adams, the wife of our second president and mother of our sixth president.
When I was asked to partake in this venture, I could not believe my ears. My family has given much to ensure that this republic would be the shining light to all who would look. I have always thought that men left alone would cause great disservice to our beloved freedoms. Many times I have said to my husband John, do not forget the women. They will keep you free from all despots and demons. I swear by Almighty God to listen and judge this man from Texas who calls himself president.
Our next jurist is a military man of great achievement and character, General George Patton.
What the hell am I doing here? I got this call and was told that you sons of bitches are putting an ex-president on trial for crimes against humanity, stealing and torturing prisoners, What the hell is the matter with you people? I've always thought politicians were assholes.
Yeah!
But I never thought I would see the day one would be tried for winning a war. Under my God, I will listen to the evidence and decide this case on its merits.
Jury number 5 is a woman of great character and intelligence, Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt.
Kind sir, I was told that I was needed to participate in a great endeavor, the trial of an ex-president. I was married to a great American who never lost his sense of humanity, no matter how much power he had or was given by his beloved people. I only agreed to come if I was allowed to speak on the 4 great pillars of the Republic. Freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and last but not least, the freedom from fear. Each year, our good institute acknowledges outstanding individuals who have demonstrated a lifelong commitment to these ideals. Presidents Truman, Kennedy, and Carter received our award. I truly fear that President Bush will never be invited to the long list of laureates. However, I will swear before God that I can listen to the evidence and judge this man with honesty and truth.
Our next member of the jury is a man who loved our country so much that he gave his life to bring compassion and understanding to our troubled land. President John F. Kennedy, our 35th president.
Some time ago, I said the following at the United Nations. The problem is not death of one man. The problem is the life of this organization. It will either grow to meet the challenges of our age, or will be gone with the wind, without influence, without force, without respect. Were we to let it die, to enfeeble its vigor, to cripple its powers, we would condemn our future. For in this development of this organization rests only one true alternative to war. And war appeals no longer as a rational alternative. Unconditional war can no longer lead to unconditional victory. It can no longer serve to settle disputes. It can no longer concern the great powers alone. For a nuclear disaster spread by wind and water and fear could well engulf the great and the small, the rich and the poor, the committed and the uncommitted alike. Mankind must put an end to war, for war will put an end to mankind. So, here, let us resolve that Dag Hammarskjöld did not live or die in vain. Let us call a truce to terror. Let us invoke the blessings of peace, and as we build an international capacity to keep peace, let us join in dismantling the national capacity to wage war. I swear in front of the Blessed Trinity that I will render a fair and just decision in this case now before me.
The 7th member of the jury is a man known as a rough rider, a visionary, concerned with our environment, President Theodore Roosevelt, our 26th President of the United States.
When I was informed of this trial, at first I was appalled. But then I was told about the rape of our forests, the greed of those in power, and I just knew that I was going to get my stick and walk in here to see if it is possible that a Republican could destroy all that I fought for during my term of office. I do swear that I will listen and come to a conclusion about the acts of this president. Hear my stick.
The 8th member of the jury is a special person. She has always fought for the rights of women and is credited with meeting with George Washington and making the first American flag, Mrs. Betsy Ross.
When I was called here today, I realized it would give me the opportunity to meet General Washington, the great hero of our generation, whom I have in fact never met before. But the legend that he asked me to make the first American flag is good for American history. And I do know about women becoming widows. 2 husbands I did give to the cause. I do know what it means when war threatens to destroy everything that you have worked for all your life. Perhaps that is why I am here today. I will stand and defend this great republic, and shame on those who bring dishonor on our beloved country. I will affirm, as any good Quaker would, that I will tell the truth, and I will listen to all evidence against the 43rd President of these United States with an open mind.
We are honored today to welcome one of the great fighters against any racism in our country, Representative Barbara Jordan of Texas.
When I took my last breath, I felt that America was in good hands. She was well on her way to tolerance. When I was told of this court proceeding, I could only wonder what has happened to the America I so loved. I thought that the Nixon years would never return. My hope and prayers are that we find America still exists and that you have added to our achievements of the 60s and 70s. I will say that President Bush does smile better than President Nixon, however, and also note that absolute power rarely smiles for long. I do swear to weigh all the evidence and come to a just decision in this case.
We could not have this case before us if we did not invite that great man of liberty and justice, the third president of these United States, President Thomas Jefferson.
When I talked to Patrick Henry, we spoke of the wonderful way our nation had come to be. One day, long ago, we met with others in a small room within the Raleigh Tavern and decided that the aristocrats held too much power over our beloved Virginia. We further spoke of the disputes between the colonies and the United Kingdom under King George. We all came to understand that eternal hostility should be waged against every form of tyranny over the minds of man. I cannot believe that our President George, a few hundred years later, would say that it was our intent to create a country that invades others based on lies and deceit. War profiteering in my time was dealt with by a firing squad. Let us hear from President Bush and know what we have created these many years ago. I do swear that I will listen and give only credit to evidence put before me in the court. So help me God.
The 11th member of the jury is a man who knows about war and peace. He was Supreme Commander of the Allies during World War II. That was our 34th President, Dwight Eisenhower.
I know the feeling of sending troops into harm's way. I watched as tens of thousands of our finest were slaughtered on the beaches of Normandy. I asked my God many times if there was a better way to please let me think of it, because this must be against everything you stand for as a God of mercy. To this day, I believe that we had to go to war because we were attacked and war was declared upon us. There was always corruption during war. Someone steals a bottle of wine, another a trophy for his friends. The magnitude of corruption that has been charged against this administration is staggering. I am told that hundreds of millions of dollars have been misplaced or stolen. I began my administration by talking about censorship going beyond common decency, and I ended my term of office with a warning that we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The question for me is, did anyone hear me? I will, by the grace of the Almighty, render a just and final decision concerning all charges and specifications.
Our last jurist is a man who stood against tyranny. He was a political force never seen before in the United States. He walked across America and forced us to see that many things were wrong in our beloved country. His dream has never dulled and will live on long after we leave this place, the Honorable Martin Luther King.
When I was asked to go to Memphis in 1968 to support workers during the garbage strike, I thought it would only be a few days out of my life, and I could help. What I did not know was that walking with the strikers would be my last act before I would meet my God in the promised land. The bullet that tore into my body did not take my sense of love for you, nor did it take my wish that all children under God would one day be free. You cannot stand by and be glad that they are not after you, because you will be next. I have come to this court to sit in judgment of a man of faith who says that he loves God, and yet has caused so much fear and anger throughout the world. One wonders what he sees when he looks into the mirror. I will listen to the evidence and render a fair and honorable decision in the People versus President George W. Bush.
Mr. Jackson, do you wish to make an opening statement at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good morning. It is truly an honor for me to stand here with you this day. Most of my life I have read about you and your wonderful achievements. I will not take too much of your time, but feel I must lay out where we are going and why we have been called here today. I remember being told of another case in our history. A staff member of the Nixon administration went to the president and told him there was a cancer in the White House and it must be stopped. I submit to you that compared to what you will hear this day, it was only a skin cancer. What we have here is a body that is consumed by a runaway cancer. The corruption of this administration is so vast and entrenched that it is difficult to believe. We will start at the beginning, when the Supreme Court told Florida to stop counting and gave the election to Mr. Bush. During the transition, the plot to invade Iraq was first talked about. We will show that the new administration was warned that terrorists were planning an attack on the United States in the near future. We will show that after Governor Bush was sworn in as the 43rd President of the United States, with his knowledge and encouragement, plans were being prepared to invade Iraq. Afghanistan was not even discussed in the national security meetings. Career federal employees were attempting to convince Vice President Richard Cheney that a group who called themselves Al-Qaeda was much more dangerous to the United States than Iraq. Mr. Clark will testify that he was told to stop pushing Al-Qaeda and get on the road to Baghdad or get out of the way. The Vice President did not want to hear anything more about Al-Qaeda. We will show that the Bush family has long-standing ties with the Osama bin Laden family and the Saudi royal family, and we will explain why the Carlyle Group became a major player in the war in Iraq. We will show that prisoners were taken out of their country, transported to Cuba, and held incommunicado for over 6 years. This is a serious violation of the Geneva Convention and violates the Articles of Nuremberg. We will show that the torture of prisoners was not perpetrated by just a few bad apples who turned rotten one day, but a systematic attempt to get information from the prisoners at any cost, including murder. We will show that there was war profiteering. Halliburton and Vice President Dick Cheney did conspire first to get the contracts and then overcharge with almost no oversight by any government agency. The term "look the other way" was used so often that people would just point their finger like this and it would be understood that no investigation was to take place. It became a joke in the White House. Administration officials lied to Congress. The Vice President and the President misled Congress and must take responsibility for the actions of their staff, as outlined in the Nuremberg Articles. You have been called here this day to listen and decide if President Bush did violate our trust and corrupt the political systems that we all live and die for. I thank you for your attention.
Would the defense like to make a statement at this time?
No, Your Honor. We reserve the right to give our opening statement at the beginning of the defense.
Mr. Jackson, any objections?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Jackson, you may call your first witness.
The people call Dr. Condoleezza Rice.
I'll be gone, yeah. You're okay.
Do you swear
Yes,
that you will give truthful and honest testimony?
On the advice of my attorney, I invoke the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States and will remain silent from this point on. I wish to state for the record that I do wish...
Objection, Your Honor. We were never notified that Dr. Rice would take the Fifth.
What the hell is this? She knows everything. Make her testify.
General Patton, please take your seat. Dr. Rice, are you represented by an attorney?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Sullivan is in the courtroom.
Mr. Sullivan, please approach the bench.
Why, I've never heard of such a thing. What kind of country have we become when a person can refuse to give testimony about one of our most important issues of the day?
Mr. President, please sit down and let me sort this out. Mr. Sullivan, can you explain why the court was not notified that Dr. Rice would refuse to testify?
The decision was only made just before we entered the courtroom. Up to that time, I was under the impression that Dr. Rice would give testimony, Your Honor.
Dr. Rice has invoked her Fifth Amendment rights under our Constitution and cannot be made to testify. I do warn the defense that they will be held in contempt of court if there are any more surprises. Mr. Jackson, do you have another witness ready, or do you need to recess to arrange for your next witness?
No, Your Honor. We will call our next witness, who is in court.
Dr. Rice, you're excused.
I gave 2 husbands so that this republic could come into existence, and you say you will not testify? Teddy, I'm tempted to use your stick.
Betsy, take your seat. We all know that someday this woman will appear before us, and we will not walk softly.
Mr. Jackson, call your next witness.
The people call Mr. Donald Rumsfeld.
Stand tall, Donald. Good man.
Do you swear that you will give truthful and honest testimony?
I do so swear, under God and in memory of 9/11.
Amen.
Mr. Rumsfeld, would you tell this court in what capacity you served President Bush?
Well, you see, you need to be a little more specific. I was the 13th and the 21st Secretary of Defense. I was also the White House Chief of Staff, and of course, one should not forget that I was the U.S. Ambassador to NATO. And I spent some time in the House of Representatives. Would you repeat your question?
What job did you hold during the presidency of the 43rd President?
Well, you know, as I've said, there are things that we know and that we don't know. And there are things we don't know that we don't know that we don't know.
Boo! Can you tell us?
But there are also things that we know, and I think that I know that I was Secretary of Defense.
Can you tell us the first time you discussed with anyone the invasion of Iraq?
The first time we thought about the invasion of Iraq was during the Clinton administration.
Oh, God.
After the terrorists attacked our wonderful ship, USS Cole, killing many of our brave Navy men. We just knew that Saddam must have had a hand in that. But I think your question had to do with, when did I first discuss the invasion? Well, I don't know. To the best of my recollection, it may have been, well, if I had to say or pick a date, I'd say maybe in 2001.
Yeah.
Sometime during our first year in office.
Can you tell us if you had any discussion concerning Al-Qaeda during this same time period?
Well, it seems to me that we did have some conversation with the outgoing administration concerning Al-Qaeda. Secretary Cohen did mention something about Osama bin Laden, and we took it under advisement.
Did you receive information that Al-Qaeda was planning an attack against the United States, and the attack would happen in the coming months?
No, we had no information that Al-Qaeda would fly passenger planes into the Twin Towers in New York City during rush hour. We didn't know that, and we didn't know that we didn't know that.
This son of a bitch on the witness stand sounds just like that pompous ass Monty. Let me have him for 5 minutes alone and he will cut this shit. He will be saying yes sir and no sir in just 5 minutes.
George, sit down and keep that mouth of yours shut.
Members of the jury, remain seated and no comments, please. Dr. Rumsfeld, please answer the question directly or I will consider giving General Patton his 5 minutes. Continue your questioning.
Very well, Your Honor. Did you ever receive instructions from the President or the Vice President to prepare an invasion of Iraq? Yes or no, please?
Yes.
Did you receive these instructions before 9/11/2001?
Well, yes.
Aha.
After 9/11, what were your instructions or orders concerning retaliation?
I was ordered by the Vice President to prepare for the invasion of Iraq and also prepare for the invasion of Afghanistan.
Why were you ordered to prepare for the invasion of Iraq?
Well, because we knew that after Afghanistan we would finally be able to invade Iraq. All we needed to do was tie 9/11 to Iraq, and we could go and get Saddam. We knew that, and we knew that we knew it.
Do you have first-hand knowledge why Secretary Powell and President Bush went to the UN before we invaded Iraq when, as you testified, the decision was already made?
Powell wanted to go to the UN. I was against it, and the President said, "What the hell, you can use the time to get ready." There was no point in fighting Powell and his weenie way of doing things. The President was correct. I did need some time to get us ready for Iraq. So Powell helped us out, without knowing that what he was saying to the Security Council was garbage. So we let him go.
You are testifying that you and President Bush knew that what Secretary Powell was telling the members of the United Nations was untrue, or as you stated, garbage?
Well, the intelligence was so vast and so confusing that it didn't take a rocket scientist to present whatever you wanted. We wanted to invade Iraq, and that is what our intelligence would show. No doubting Thomases were allowed near the President.
Let me ask you some questions about the alleged torture of prisoners in Iraq. When did you first become aware that there was a problem at Abu Ghraib?
Well, we knew we had problems in Cuba, but we were okay there because we were outside the jurisdiction of the federal courts. And of course, we controlled who came into the camp. We left the interrogators alone and let them do their thing. We wanted information. And to tell you the truth, I did not care how we got it, as long as we got it. Some of the intelligence people were sent to Iraq to help, because our people over there were not getting the job done. We started to hear rumors about a few soldiers going too far. I think there were a few prisoners who died.
If you have first-hand knowledge, when did President Bush learn of the allegations of torture?
First-hand knowledge? Well, I suppose one could say he was informed, along with the Vice President and myself, when I first heard about some difficulties in Cuba.
There were a number of suicides at the prison camp in Cuba, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know the number of suicides?
No.
If I was to say over 30, would that be a fair number, given what you know?
I have no idea how many committed suicide.
Did you keep any records of the number of suicides?
I'm sure there are records, but I did not keep track of the Taliban or Al-Qaeda who wanted to die. It was just one less prisoner to take care of, feeding and things like that.
Do you know how many prisoners you had at Camp X-Ray in Cuba?
Anywhere from 600 to 1,000, depending on the coming and going of the prisoners. I'd say an average of about 700 or so. I think that may be about right.
During President Bush's State of the Union address to the nation, he talked of Al-Qaeda members being arrested or meeting a different fate. He went on to say, let me put it this way, in a tone that appalled many, they are no longer a problem to the United States and our friends and allies. Do you remember that statement by the President?
I do not remember everything that the President talked about during that speech, but that sounds about correct.
Concerning the treatment of the prisoners, did you take that statement as confirmation that you were allowed a lot of latitude when interrogating prisoners?
Well, let me think. We did not condone torture.
Did you authorize stress and duress, including sleep deprivation, denial of medication for battle injuries, forcing prisoners to stand or kneel for hours with hoods on, subjecting them to loud noises and sudden flashes of light, and engaging in cultural humiliating practices, such as having them kicked by female officers?
Well, stress and duress are well-accepted ways to interrogate enemy combatants.
On February 12, 2002, you called the press reports about mistreatment of prisoners international hyperventilation, and went on to say that you treat detainees in a humane way. Do you remember making that statement in 2002?
I made so many statements concerning the treatment of prisoners. That may be one of them. Yeah, that sounds about what I would say.
Well, that was a lie, was it not?
No, I was responding to a question. I would not say I was lying. Just trying to answer some stupid question by a reporter.
Shit, does this man have a damn soul?
Nope.
Your Honor, this is all I have for this witness.
Mr. Darrow, you may begin your cross-examination of this witness.
Good morning, Secretary Rumsfeld. My name is Clarence Darrow, and I will not keep you very long. How long have you known President Bush?
Well, I guess maybe over 30 years.
Have you ever known President Bush to order torture?
No, I never heard President Bush order torture.
Have you ever heard President Bush say he wanted to invade Iraq for profit?
For profit? Oh, no.
What was your understanding as to why President Bush gave the order to invade Iraq?
My understanding was that he wanted to take the fight to the terrorists and not have another 9/11 here.
During the time you were discussing the preparation for the war and the eventual invasion, at any time did you say to the President that he was wrong?
No, never.
Then it is fair to say that you agreed with President Bush to invade Iraq.
Yes.
Just this last question. Acting as President Bush's senior advisor in military matters, do you believe that the President did anything criminal?
Objection. Mr. Rumsfeld is not here as an expert concerning the law.
Sustained. Mr. Darrow, ask the question in such a way that Mr. Rumsfeld does not have to offer a legal opinion, please.
Withdraw the question. That is all I have for Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, except to thank him for his great service.
Objection, Your Honor. What is this? I love Rummy Day?
Objection sustained. Mr. Darrow, that was not necessary. Mr. Prosecutor, you may call your next witness. Mr. Rumsfeld, you are excused.
The people call Dr. Paul Wolfowitz.
World Bank, dude.
Dr. Wolfowitz, or his representative?
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, please approach with the witness and the other lawyers.
I have been notified that Mr. Wolfowitz will take the Fifth Amendment and will not answer any questions put to him today. I do apologize on behalf of Mr. Wolfowitz.
Again, the court was not notified that the witness was going to invoke the Fifth Amendment. Are you the attorney of record for Mr. Wolfowitz, Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Dale Bosley, my marshal will accompany you downstairs so that you may be processed. I will try you for contempt of this court tomorrow or sometime next week. Dale, will you see to it that Mr. Sullivan receives accommodations that are, shall we say, appropriate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Sullivan.
I do apologize to the jury and the attorneys. Mr. Jackson, do you have another witness ready who will testify?
Yes, Your Honor. The people call Mr. Richard Cheney. It may take a moment, Your Honor. Mr. Cheney has been kept out of sight for security reasons.
Oh, Cheney. Yeah, he's the man. Stand tall, man. Stand tall.
To give truthful and honest testimony.
Yes, I do swear.
Good morning, Mr. Cheney. My name is Robert H. Jackson, and I have been charged to prosecute this case.
I know who you are, Mr. Jackson.
You have come here today under the grant of immunity. Is that correct, Mr. Cheney?
Yes. Right.
Under the terms of this agreement, you have been advised that if any time you lie, the grant of immunity will be revoked, and you will be subject to criminal prosecution. Is that also correct, Mr.
Yes,
Cheney?
I understand.
You are represented by an attorney. Is that also true, sir?
Yes.
Now we may find out just what these characters are up to. This one lies, off to jail he goes. I told you, George, it would all work out.
It's about time someone is going to tell us what the hell they were doing. You are right, lady. Let's see what happens.
When did you first discuss the invasion of Iraq with President Bush?
During the Florida spectacle, I remember George saying that if we won, it would be a sign from God that he was supposed to go out and get Saddam. That was the first time. I told him that he should wait until the Supreme Court came down with their ruling. And also, he needed to be sworn in before he could invade. We both laughed about that because we already had word from his brother that Florida was guaranteed no matter what the court said. We had our people in the Florida Senate ready to declare the electoral votes would go to Bush. We had all the bases covered. Gore was never going to win, and that's why we even set up a transitional government before any final decision. It was like playing craps with loaded dice. We knew what the next roll would give us the White House. We had a great time laughing over the media coverage and Gore trying to win.
Objection?
On what grounds?
Thank God they stole the election.
Yep, that's right.
Members of the jury, just please stay seated. Mr. Darrow, your objection is without merit or foundation. Please sit down. Mr. Jackson, you may continue.
Mr. Cheney, what was the first meeting of the Security Council in the White House most concerned with?
Getting Saddam and how we were going to get the American people to support our invasion.
To that end, getting the American people to support your actions in Iraq, what did you do first?
Well, if I remember correctly, we told Rummy to get a plan together, report back in a few days on what we needed on the military side. We also told George Tenet to gather all the intelligence that would support our goal of invading Iraq by the end of the year after the summer months. I was asked to set up a group who would support us, and the President made it clear that no doubting Thomases should be in any key positions by the middle of August.
At that time, did you run into difficulty moving people around?
No. We had a few pains in the ass like Richard Clark, who wanted to worry about Afghanistan and bin Laden, but I told him to fuck off. And not bring me that shit again. He just made his life hell, and finally after 9/11 he retired. We all laughed about another doubting Thomas out the door. The word got around very fast that Iraq was the target.
What happened to your plans after the 9/11 attack?
First, we thought that it would set us back, and it did, but we knew that all the American people were with us and wanted revenge. So we just moved our timetable and went into Afghanistan first. It was more of a plus than a minus.
What did you do after that first meeting, after 9/11, with the National Security Council?
Well, I got on the phone and let my friends at Halliburton know that we were going to make more money than they ever imagined. When they came to the White House to discuss energy, they were surprised about what I was telling them. First Afghanistan, then Iraq, the cash register was going nuts. We could not believe what was to come. We had thought in the millions, but now we could think in the billions. I felt like a king, giving his subjects precious stones for gifts. I was in seventh heaven. We were all going to get very rich.
Your testimony is that the invasion of Iraq was for profit.
Yep, dice loaded again. Saddam was a real bad guy. We would go in and bomb the hell out of the place, and my friends would get very rich rebuilding the new and free Iraq. Congress would not dare say no. We could pay any amount of money to get our people in after the war, and the taxpayers would pay the bill. It was the best time of my life.
In the year 2000, what was your paycheck from Halliburton?
Somewhere around 40 million.
You had some accounting irregularity when you were the CEO of Halliburton. Do you know the amount of money that was involved in these irregularities?
Yes, they said it was about 100 million.
When you held these energy meetings, Congress asked for those documents. Why did you not just turn them over?
Are you serious? The American people have no right to see them. They were private, and if it got out what we discussed, we all knew we would go to jail or worse, go broke.
How many pages did you hold back from the American people?
Oh, I'm not sure. Somewhere 13 to 14,000 pages.
Did the Supreme Court say that you did not have to surrender the pages?
Yeah, we won that one. That is why we were able to pass information during those meetings. It was perfect.
How much did the energy companies kick into your re-election campaign?
I don't know. Millions to get billions is what I used to tell them.
Let's talk a little about your old company, Halliburton. Did Halliburton receive special treatment when the contracts were up for bids?
Sure. They're my friends. They knew about the contracts before anybody. We made it seem like they were the only corporation that could do the job.
Halliburton did get into some difficulty with their charges to the government. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the goddamn fools got carried away. They were charging for meals to the military that they never delivered. I was pissed when I heard about that. There was something about the price of gas. We handled that okay, but the meal thing was a disaster for us. Even the media, who we had under our influence, was running with this story.
Do you know how much money was overcharged for the meals?
I think the investigation is still going on. However, I was told somewhere around $75 million was ripped off. It was so stupid.
Let's talk about the Carlyle Group. It is a private group of investors, is that correct?
Yes.
What can you tell us about this group and the war on terrorism?
Well, the offices of the Carlyle Group are on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., midway right between the White House and the Capitol building, within a stone's throw of the headquarters of the FBI and numerous government departments. The address reflects Carlyle's position at the very center of Washington. We gave United Defense, they're a subsidiary of Carlyle, about $470 million to continue development of the Crusader missile. Pissed off a lot of military analysts, but Carlucci and Rummy wanted it, so the president told us to okay the program.
Who is Carlucci?
He's the CEO of the Carlyle Group.
Are you saying that you gave a contract to a group because Rummy was a friend of Carlucci?
That's the way it works in Washington.
How did you and Secretary Rumsfeld come to know Carlucci?
Carlucci was from the Reagan administration. He was Secretary of Defense and worked at the CIA before that, I'm sure.
Does President Bush's father, the 41st president, have a connection to the Carlyle Group?
Sure. He's a senior advisor. Used his connections to the royal family in Saudi Arabia to get them to invest. And the bin Laden family were involved, but after 9/11, we thought they should pull out. Too bad, they had lots of money to invest.
James Baker is a member of the Carlyle Group, is he not?
Yeah, I think his title is senior counselor.
He was Secretary of State and Secretary of Treasury under President Reagan, was he not?
Yes.
He is also defending Saudi Arabia against the victims of 9/11 who are suing the royal family and the bin Laden family.
Well, his law firm is defending the Saudis, which is all I know about his involvement.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Please answer yes or no.
Okay, I'll try.
Did President Bush decide to invade Iraq before 9/11?
Yes.
Did President Bush know about the profits that you, Halliburton, and the Carlyle Group were going to make on the wars?
Yes.
Did President Bush know about the torture of prisoners at Camp X-Ray in Cuba?
Yes.
Did he know about the torture of prisoners at Abu Ghraib?
Yes.
Did President Bush know that his representatives were lying to Congress when they appeared before investigating committees?
Yes.
Have you testified truthfully today?
Yes, to the best of my ability.
Your Honor, that is all the questions I have at this time for Mr. Cheney. I would request the right to recall this witness at a later time.
Mr. Jackson, you'll have to argue that motion if you wish to recall Mr. Cheney.
Your Honor, the people rest.
Mr. Darrow, you may begin your cross-examination of Mr. Cheney.
Good morning, Mr. Vice President. For the record, I'm Clarence Darrow, and I represent the defendant, President George W. Bush.
Good morning.
Mr. Cheney, you were given complete immunity for your testimony here today. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Which means that no matter what you did, or what your involvement, you cannot be prosecuted for those crimes. Is that correct?
Yes.
In your testimony, you put all the blame on President Bush for the actions concerning Iraq. Is that correct, Mr. Cheney?
No.
Well, it sure sounded that way to me. You are innocent and President Bush did all those terrible things. Is that what your testimony says?
No, I accept my part in this mess.
But you testified that President Bush made all the decisions. Is that right?
No, I made many decisions, but always at the direction of the President. We all served the President.
Let's talk now about your testimony concerning Iraq. You testified that President Bush made the decision to go to war during the time you were waiting for official results of the 2000 election. Is that true?
Well, that was the first time I actually heard him say he wanted to invade Iraq, yes.
Do you remember his exact words?
No, not his exact words.
He could have just been talking about what he would like to do and not what he intended to do. Is that possible?
Well, I got the feeling that if he won the election, we were going to war in Iraq.
Mr. Cheney, we are not here to hear about your feelings. Is it possible that President Bush said something like, I would like to get Saddam?
Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Cheney has answered the question.
Your objection is overruled. I want to hear this.
Do you need me to repeat the question, Mr. Cheney?
No, it's possible that he said something like, I would like to get Saddam, but after the election was certified, the first thing he said to me was, now we can go get that bastard.
Objection, non-responsive.
Mr. Cheney, try to answer the question and not add to the answer.
Mr. Cheney, in all the meetings you had with Rumsfeld and President Bush, did you ever state that it was a bad idea to invade Iraq?
Yes, many times. I know that everybody thinks that I was the hawk, but I wanted to invade Afghanistan, take out Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. I also wanted to stay in Afghanistan and rebuild it so that the Arabs would see that we were not going to invade the Middle East. We could always keep our eye on Iraq and invade later if we had to, but not right after Afghanistan. I told the President in confidence that Powell was correct. We should not do it yet. It was his decision to go to Iraq.
It is you who have the ties with Halliburton. Is that correct?
Yes.
You stand to make millions of dollars off this war. Is that not true?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no more questions for this witness.
Mr. Jackson, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Cheney, you're excused. Mr. Jackson, call your next witness. Mr. Darrow, do you wish to make an opening statement?
Your Honor, we request that you dismiss all charges against President Bush. The prosecution has not proven their case.
Your motion is denied. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor, we do. Honored members of the jury, I share Mr. Jackson's admiration of you, and I also spent a good deal of my life trying to live up to your values. The case before you is based on the concept that an elected leader can be held responsible for acts he may or may not have committed during his term of office. Many of you on this jury were the very ones who set up a system in our Constitution to address this very question, and that is called impeachment. The House of Representatives is where this case belongs and not this court. For you to find President Bush guilty, you would have to believe a man who sold his soul for the price of freedom. Mr. Cheney, once a good friend of the president, has sold him out. He asked you to believe that he was totally innocent of all things, yet he cuts a deal with the prosecution. You must ask yourself this: why would he cut a deal if he had nothing to hide? We are going to call many witnesses. However, President Bush has said that he wants to testify alone. He believes in America and puts his faith in the hands of our great leaders who have given so much to our beloved land. Therefore, I will call only one witness. The defense calls President George W. Bush, the 43rd President of the United States.
Mr. President, please come up and take the witness stand.
Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth?
Under God, I do so swear.
Hallelujah.
Mr. President, let's get to the heart of these charges. When did you make the final decision to invade Iraq?
It was after 9/11 when we gave the dictator every opportunity to comply with the UN resolutions.
Mr. President, why did you go to the United Nations and ask them to act on their resolution concerning Iraq?
Well, my advisors thought that if I made a personal appearance at the UN, then we stood a good chance of getting the UN to move against the dictator of Iraq.
Mr. President, did you ever say to Vice President Cheney that you were going to invade Iraq before your appearance at the UN?
No, I was frustrated with the UN, that is no secret, and I may have said something like, I'd like to get him, but the decision was not made until all options were gone. All my advisors agreed that we had to go into Iraq to protect America.
Did you ever tell Secretary Rumsfeld to get ready to go to war before 9/11?
No, but I did tell them was to check to see if all options in the Middle East were updated, so we would not be surprised in the future.
After 9/11, what did you tell your national security staff concerning Afghanistan?
I told them to get together all options. We had to go after Al-Qaeda and bin Laden, and if the Taliban did not give him up, I wanted to go into Iraq and get that murderer.
Sir, I think you said Iraq. Did you mean Afghanistan?
Yes, of course. Bin Laden was in Afghanistan, and that is where we were going, Afghanistan.
What was the reason for going into Iraq?
Well, we knew Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. We knew he was shopping around the world to get nukes. We knew that he hated all Americans and would attack us if he got the opportunity, and I was not going to let that happen. We knew he killed millions in Iraq by gas and slaughtered his own people. This was a very dangerous guy.
Did you at any time consider that some of your staff, including the Vice President, would make money off this war?
I don't know anything about that. We had to keep the promises I made to those brave firefighters in New York when I met with them just after 9/11. That was the only reason for going into Iraq. It was for firefighters.
Your Honor, may we take a short recess? I wish to speak to my client.
You may speak to your client.
Don't say anything to these questions except yes or no. Yes or no.
Whatever you say, yes.
You may continue, Mr. Darrow, with your direct.
Mr. President, is it true that you did not know that prisoners were being tortured at Camp X-Ray?
Objection. Mr. Darrow is leading the witness to such a degree that he may well want to just give us the answers and save some time.
Mr. Jackson, that last part of your question was uncalled for. However, Mr. Darrow, try to ask questions without leading the witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. President, did you ever indicate to anyone that you condoned the torture of prisoners?
No.
Mr. President, did you ever make any profit from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq?
No.
Mr. President, do you have any direct ties to the Carlyle Group?
No.
Did you ever tell any of your subordinates to lie to Congress?
No.
Mr. President, did you... That's all the questions I had for President Bush, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Jackson, you may cross-examine President Bush.
Your Honor, because the people find themselves in a position that to cross-examine President Bush would bring more shame on the office of the presidency, we will not cross-examine this witness.
Order in the court.
Objection! That statement is outrageous and must be struck from the record.
Yes, Your Honor, this is outrageous, and I withdraw my statement. However, in respect for the jury members, we do not wish to cross-examine this witness.
Please sit down, Mr. Darrow. President Bush, you are excused. Mr. Jackson, you may begin your closing argument.
This is a sad day for me. I love this country called America so much that I spent my life defending our values. The case you have to decide is most difficult. No one here wants to say that our president lied about going to war. No one here wants to say that many, including the highest elected officials in our land, did take large amounts of money when our soldiers were being killed. No one wants to say that elected and appointed high-ranking officials of our own government, like the Congress, I do not want to say that from the president on down, they knew about prisoners being tortured and did nothing. I wish I did not have to say these things, because even as I say them, I shudder at the image of it all. Some say I have the most difficult job. I say you have the most difficult job, maybe the most difficult job of all time. I wish you well in your deliberations and will accept your wisdom, as I truly believe that you are here to see justice done. Thank you.
Mr. Darrow, you may now give your closing.
I agree with Mr. Jackson. This is a sad day when the Congress of the United States chooses not to impeach the president, but a court decides that the American people must have a trial. That is a sad day in our history. To convict President Bush, you must believe Dick Cheney, a Judas who sold his friend for a few pieces of silver. This man is a coward and will not stand up and say what is true. He cut a deal and protected his own ass. President Bush does have faults. Like all of us, he is fallible. He makes mistakes. But you must ask yourself, who profited from the war in Afghanistan? Who made a financial killing in Iraq? I put it to you this way. If a backward country like Afghanistan could attack us, what could a country that had weapons of mass destruction do to us? That is what President Bush was faced with. Will you take the chance of another attack? Or would you ask your advisors the best course of action and then let them make a decision? That is what President Bush did. You may not agree with his decision, but don't condemn him for making it. The torture of prisoners is most disturbing. Do you really believe that the President of the United States, after putting in writing that all prisoners be treated humanely, would allow his subordinates to go beyond what he has ordered? Would he allow that if he knew and knew what they were up to? I say no. I could go on and on, but I pray that you, who sat in the seat of the President of the United States, will tell the other members of the jury what it is like to make life and death decisions every day. Not just once in a while, but every day, with the hope that you have made the best decisions possible. I join Mr. Jackson again in saying that you were brought here for a special reason, to render justice. And justice demands that you back a verdict of innocent of all charges. I thank you and wish you well in your deliberation.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, normally I would give long instructions to the jury. However, looking at you, it would be arrogant of me to presume to instruct you on the process of justice. You will receive this case in a few minutes. I do want to remind you that in this court, there is no finding of not guilty. The defendant is either guilty or innocent. Members of the jury, President Bush lies in a coma. What you saw here today was only his soul. You are deciding his innocence or guilt in these matters, but I will decide the punishment, if there is any to be considered. You may retire to the jury room and start to deliberate this case. Members of the public, while the jury deliberates on these 6 charges, please think of your own responses to this testimony. You too may be asked to weigh in on the judgment of this president. Thank you.
I think this is a bunch of bullshit.
Yes.
Hell, if we convict Bush of anything, they will go after the next president.
George, have you heard anything, or is that mouth of yours just for moving for the sake of making noise?
I heard the evidence, but there are other issues here. You can't tie the hands of a commander-in-chief.
Tie his hands? He ordered the torture of people who were not even tried yet. What the hell is that, George? We said at Nuremberg that you cannot do the very things that we heard today. Accountability is what those trials were all about.
They were Nazis. This is an American president, for God's sake.
Yeah, they were terrible human beings. And if we say okay to what the defendant did, what does that make us? Let's start the deliberations with the others.
Can you imagine that woman, that Dr. Rice, coming to this trial and using the Bill of Rights to refuse to testify? I was tempted to smack her. She is a disgrace to our republic. Someday she will face final judgment, and she will not fare well if I have anything to say about it.
Bessie, I thought you were going to jump over the railing and smack her. All I could do was laugh at that picture. I know how you felt.
This gang of thieves, liars, and destroyers of everything we fought for must be held accountable for their actions. But we are charged to decide the case against Bush, and not against that woman. Let us join the others and decide what to do with this man called Bush.
Okay, can you imagine war profiteers in the White House and on the battlefield?
I lived during the Nixon administration. Yes, Mr. President, I can imagine corruption at the highest level.
Where was Congress when all of this was going on?
Some believe the leadership of the Congress are involved in some way, and they fear that impeachment will bring out their part in this corrupt government.
We have much work to do. Let us join the others and see what we can do to stop this madness.
Well, let's get this over with and send this guy back to let him live his life. To my mind, he's not done anything that we haven't done in one time or another in our lives.
General Patton, I have 2 requests of you. First, would you stop using that disgraceful language? My second request is that you never, and I do mean never, address me as lady again. You will address me as Mrs. Adams. Maybe if I begin to like you, I will tell you to call me Abigail. But for now, it is Mrs. Adams.
Well, I'll be a son of a bitch.
Thank you, General Patton. However, in my day, women were not allowed to be on juries. It would be fitting to have a member of the gentler sex lead us in these deliberations. Therefore, I decline.
I, Betsy Ross, hereby nominate Eleanor Roosevelt. She knows about the times and is the perfect person to keep us working.
Are there any others who wish to volunteer to be foreperson? Then I second the nomination of Mrs. Roosevelt.
Congratulations to Eleanor Roosevelt. I do not envy you in the least. I'll help you in any way that I can.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan.
All in favor of Mrs. Roosevelt, raise your right hand.
Thank you.
Can we vote and get this thing over with?
General Patton may be correct about taking a vote to see where we are at this moment. If you find that President Bush is innocent of all charges, raise your hand.
What?
If you find that President Bush is guilty, raise your hand. I see we have much work to do. 3 votes for innocent and 4 votes for guilty. I do suppose the rest of you would like to hear from both sides before casting your vote. General Patton, would you like to tell why you think President Bush is innocent?
First of all, you do not try a president for winning a war. President Bush did what he had to do in order to protect the American people.
The question before us is, did President Bush lie to the American people about invading Iraq? The American people, including Congress, were told that the main reason for going to war was that this Saddam person was a threat to the United States. Maybe we should try to answer that question first. How much of a threat was he, and why invade at that particular date?
There are some things that I do not understand, and I was hoping that Richard Clark would explain to us about how much intelligence there was about this bin Laden guy. Why didn't Clark testify?
I remember Cheney giving direct testimony that Clark was isolated and then retired after the attack in New York. Mr. Jackson did mention Clark in his opening remarks, and Cheney seemed to validate what Jackson said. So why have Clark in to do it all over again?
I think that Mr. Jackson was very sad speaking about the things he had to say and wanted to spare us more and more details.
Well, for me, this Cheney guy is a turncoat and a coward. I was furious that he sat there and turned on President Bush. I have a hard time believing anything he says.
Yes, Teddy, Cheney was a coward and a bit of a weasel. However, what he said made a lot of sense. Why would he lie and risk losing his immunity?
There's this question of this new concept called enemy combatant. It's new even for me. I'd like to know more about this enemy combatant and the treatment of prisoners.
They're spies and should have been shot on the spot.
What? You don't know that? But my goodness, General, did you shoot everyone in Italy?
No, I would have had me shot.
Let's try to do this in a way that does not cause us to fight with one another. As chair of this jury, can I say let's look at the charges, take one at a time, and see if there is agreement on any of them. Would you like to try that approach? Yes. Fine then. The first charge is war profiteering. Anyone from either side want to tackle this one? Yes, General Patton?
Cheney would be the one who would made the money on the bodies of our soldiers. I did not hear anything that would cause me to vote guilty on this count.
Bessie?
There was testimony from Mr. Cheney that the Carlyle Group made money through that company who made the Crusader missile. The amount of money was $470 million, and President Bush's father was involved with that group. I think that has a bad odor to it, don't you, General Patton?
I don't like it. But is it enough to convict George W. of war profiteering? What do you think, President Jefferson?
Well, it is for me.
Me too. If your family member makes millions on a war that you decided to start, that's enough for me.
Well, please, I have something to say about this one. The Bush family has a history of selling to our enemies. I remember when the grandfather, Prescott Bush, got into hot water with my husband, Franklin, for supporting the Nazis in 1942. I don't know all the details, but Prescott was managing director of Brown Brothers and Harriman. The U.S. government ordered the seizure of Nazi Germany banking operations in New York City, which was being run by Prescott Bush.
We're not here to try the grandfather for war crimes. This has little to do with what George W. Bush did, or did not order, and approve. Don't you agree, George?
Spoken like a lawyer. Abe, but you are correct. What Prescott Bush did or did not do is not our concern. He has already been judged on those charges.
I only brought it up because I wanted you to know that this family is not above making money during a war.
You still have not given me anything to indicate that George W. Bush made a profit.
So be it, General. Then I'm assuming there is a guilty verdict in the charge of invading another country and lying about the justifications for that act.
Good.
I'm not voting a guilty verdict on this charge yet. I need more from you, Madam Chair.
Yes, General. Let's see where the others stand at the moment. All in favor of a guilty verdict on this charge, raise your hand.
George, remember when both Rumsfeld and Cheney made it clear that President Bush wanted to invade Iraq before 9/11?
Yes, I remember that, Ike. But I need some time to think before I vote guilty on this charge. Let's move on and come back to this at a later time.
We can do that, General. We're not trying to get you to agree with us. You must believe in what you decide. The next charge is misappropriation of federal monies.
This is a strange charge to me. If we find him guilty of anything, would not this charge automatically be included?
Yes, I think you're correct, Teddy. Mrs. Roosevelt, I suggest we move on to another charge and deal with this later.
Yes, I agree. The next charge is lying to Congress. I see you have something to say about that, General Patton.
Now, here is a strange charge, lying to Congress. They all lie in Congress. I hate politicians. You can never depend on them. You probably don't agree, Mr. Jefferson.
Congress is not on trial. It's George W. Bush who is on trial.
Yes.
Did he lie?
Yes.
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 Yes, yes.
There we have it then. A unanimous verdict that George W. Bush lied. Let's take a break and stretch our legs.
Great idea.
Abe, I remember you talking about the Civil War when we first came into this courtroom. Are you still haunted by that terrible war?
I watched hundreds of thousands of Americans kill each other, and there was not a good enough reason that would justify the cost of that war. There was so much blood, the country never got over it. It's still divided. The South was almost destroyed. I still see the dead asking me why. Yes, I am haunted by the dead.
God, sometimes I think we will never learn. War solves nothing. It may give you a little time to try and solve problems, but in itself, it is never worth the cost. I remember talking to paratroopers before Normandy and knowing that the estimate was 75% losses. We were lucky and it turned out to be only 20%, but still, 1 out of the 5 guys that I was talking to would not be coming back. War is hell, and maybe all leaders should spend a month in hell before taking the reins of power?
Well, at the very least, it would seem our hands were forced to act. When South Carolina seceded and 5 other states followed because I was elected, I had to act. Fort Sumter was the last chance for peace, and then the South fired that shot. There must have been something that could have been done, but I wasn't in office yet, and the war was on a course that no one could change.
I also have nightmares about the dead and dying. We stopped the Nazis and you freed the slaves. We did some good.
Well, members of the jury, shall we complete our work? The next charge has 2 parts. 1, the mistreatment of prisoners, and 2, the killing of the innocent during the occupation of Iraq.
The articles that we are to use in judgment of this case say that you cannot deport or ill-treat the civilian population. The camp located in Cuba seems to violate these articles. Holding prisoners incommunicado for years must be a violation. I do not care what strange names they come up with. They are either prisoners of war or they should not be there at all.
Yeah, I've never met an enemy who is not a combatant, nor a combatant who is not an enemy. This enemy-combatant term seems redundant to me.
I think it was an attempt to get around POW status or prisoner status.
I agree. If they were in uniform, then they are prisoners of war. If they were trying to mix with the civilian population, they are spies and should have been shot on the battlefield.
Even when the southern states seceded from the Union, we tried to treat them with dignity. But there were terrible exceptions. Many of the prisoners on both sides died during incarceration. Part of my terrible nightmares comes from a place called Andersonville. Grant stopped the prisoner exchange and Sherman was burning everything in sight. The prison was built for 10,000 and ended up housing up to 40,000 in 1864 alone. The death rate was awful. Did I play a role in that? Could Jefferson Davis and I have been brought up on charges? I fear the answer is yes.
In the Second World War, we tried to treat our POWs with some sense of dignity. Also, were there incidents? Of course there were. I can understand the bad treatment of people who were trying to kill you, but civilians are another matter. Many of these people who were tortured were civilians. When you were trying to win over the hearts and minds of the people, why torture them? That's the part I don't understand.
War is insanity. To try and understand it seems like a contradiction in terms. How do you logically comprehend something that is madness?
Maybe we should now take a vote on each charge and see where we stand.
Let's do that.
Yeah, let's see where we are.
On the first charge of profiteering, all voting innocent, raise your hands. All voting guilty on this charge, raise your hands. On the second charge, lying about going to war, all voting for innocent, raise your hand. All voting guilty, raise your hand. The third charge is misappropriation of federal monies. All voting for innocent, raise your hand. All voting innocent, raise your hand. All voting for guilty, raise your hand. On the fifth charge, causing countless deaths of innocent Iraqis. During the occupation, all voting innocent, raise your hand.
Come on.
All voting guilty, raise your hand. The sixth and last charge is the mistreatment of prisoners. All voting innocent, raise your hand. All voting guilty, raise your hand. If you wish to take a break, I will go through the list afterward to inform you of where we are.
Yes, I can use a break. This business is wearing me out. Come on, let's stretch our legs.
Do you think we're doing the right thing here, President Washington?
Yes, no president should think of himself as a king. He must remind the republic that leaders serve at the pleasure of the people.
Mrs. Adams, do you think the republic will survive much longer?
Betsy, call me Abigail.
Yes, the republic will survive. Every 200 years or so there seems to be a crisis, but it will survive.
There were a few times, Mr. President, that I thought you were going to hit one of the witnesses with that big stick of yours.
Well, Mr. President, you were right. I did not like that guy Cheney or that woman Dr. Rice. I did have to laugh when Betsy Ross was tempted to borrow my stick to use on the doctor.
I have the tally. Would you all take your places, and I'll tell you where we are at the moment. On charge 1, war profiteering, guilty. 1, innocent. 11 guilty. On the charge 2, lying about going to war, 1 innocent, 11 guilty. On charge 3, misappropriation of federal monies, guilty by unanimous vote. The charge 4, lying to Congress, guilty by unanimous vote. The 5th charge, causing countless deaths of innocent Iraqis during the occupation. A split vote of 6-6. The 6th charge, the mistreatment of prisoners, guilty, 12 votes. What would you like to do with the charges which do not have a clear verdict?
I came here thinking that I would not find President Bush guilty of anything. I gave you my best and honest decision based on the evidence. Please don't ask me to do more.
I believe that General Patton is correct. We came to listen and decide. Those charges that do not have 12 votes should be announced as undecided by this jury.
I agree with General Patton and President Washington. We have done enough and should announce our decision.
All in favor of announcing our decisions as they stand now, please raise your hand. Very well. We will return to the courtroom.
Right on.
All rise for the Honorable Supreme Court Justice John Jay.
Please be seated. I understand that you, the jury, have decided this case.
Yes, Your Honor.
Please bring in President Bush.
Way to go, George.
Oh my God.
Please read your decision to President Bush.
We, the jury, have found President Bush guilty of the following charges: war profiteering, misappropriation of federal monies, mistreatment of prisoners. As to the other 3 charges, We were undecided and voted to announce that we could not reach a verdict.
Well, thank you, members of the jury. Citizens, the jury has been unable to reach a consensus on 3 of the 6 counts. All 3 of these are really violations against the citizenry of the world. Given that, I would like to have the marshal take a vote of the citizen representation here on each of those 3 charges, and I will consider the outcome in my punishment. So please raise your hand to show innocence or guilt on each charge.
On charge 1, war profiteering, all voting for innocent, raise your hands. All voting for guilty, raise your hand.
Ask for attorney representation.
You put them down. Charge 2, lying about going to war, all voting for innocent, raise your hands.
Plants. No. I'm asking for attorney representation at this time.
All voting for guilty, raise your hand.
Hallelujah.
All guilty. Charge 5, counting countless deaths of innocent Iraqis during the occupation. All voting for innocent, raise your hands. All voting for guilty, raise your hand.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and service. Both the jury and the citizens have accomplished their task, and now I will pass judgment upon the defendant. President Bush, please rise and face the citizens to hear the final judgment of this court.
Oh, the man is
Evil.
have mercy. Be us up there.
You have been in a coma. You will now be returned to consciousness and allowed to continue your life.
Oh, God.
However, when you sleep at night, your soul will travel to different parts of the world and will be part of the suffering you have created. When a father tries to protect his children from your wars but can't, you will feel that anguish. When a child cries for food and water, you will feel that terrible hunger. When our elders are dying from lack of medicine, you will know and feel what they feel. The isolation, the fear, and utter abandonment by their government. When a bomb explodes and a mother watches in horror as her child is torn apart, you will feel, hear, and smell that pain. When one of our beloved soldiers points a gun at his head and pulls the trigger, you will be forced to watch as his eyes fade, his brain covers the walls, and his family screams in agony. You will remember this trial and the punishment during sleep for the rest of your life. How you handle your affairs from this time on will determine your final judgment. I strongly suggest that you use your very limited time to evaluate what has happened here this day.
This is the end.
Or the beginning.